So I'd like to say hello and welcome. My name is Emily Nottingham, and I'm with the Graduate Student Council Professional Development Committee. And I would first like to remind everyone to leave their microphones off during the presentation. And then next, I'd like to remind you that participation in this event can count towards earning the Graduate Student Council Professional Development Certificate. And so graduate students and postdocs can receive 1 point if they attend a full workshop, and the points will be awarded after completing the feedback survey that will be sent to participants after the event. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Professional Development Seminar Series, or would like to know more about upcoming events, I'll drop a link in the chat to give you more information. But in short, students who attend at least 5 events organized by the Professional Development Committee and complete the feedback surveys in the 2020-2021 academic year will be awarded a Professional Development Certificate at the Graduate Student Council Award ceremony at the end of the spring semester. And so now I would like to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Stephanie Shames, who's an assistant professor in the Division of Biology at Kansas State University. And her lab studies host pathogen interactions and bacterial pathogenesis. And Dr. Shames graduated with a PhD in microbiology and immunology from the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. She then started her postdoctoral work at Yale School of Medicine and joined K-State in 2017.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. I appreciate that introduction. It's really nice to see you guys today. I am going to want to get to know you. I think that's really important. So hopefully I can maybe see you around campus. If you want to keep your cameras off, that's totally fine. But I would like to know, we'll get to the point where I will ask you who you are. So without further ado, I will get started. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, I am assuming everybody can see this. So if you can't see it, let me know. But I have to ask no matter how many times I do this. So today we're all here to discuss strategies for promoting research on the web. And so, you know, in this day and age, this is becoming increasingly important. And one of the reasons I was actually very honored to be asked to give this presentation, I am fairly active with promoting research, my own and others, on the web. And I have been for years now. So what I'm going to tell you about is mostly my take on things. I would encourage you to go and talk to other people about what they do, or to ask me questions about pros and cons. I got some questions emailed to me. I will address those at the end of the talk, and then there should be some time for questions afterwards. So if there's anything else you'd like to know, I would be happy to address it or point you in the right direction. So, yep, as Emily said, so I'm an assistant professor in the Division of Biology. We study bacterial pathogenesis and host pathogen interactions. Not so critical for this talk exactly what we do, but I'm more on the molecular biology side of things. So my lab is, my lab does molecular biology. We're in the lab space. And so keep that in mind for some of these things that I'm discussing, because there are definitely going to be field-specific ways you can promote your research. So I will be able to skip this slide because Emily gave such a nice introduction. So yeah, I'm originally from Canada. I'm a dual citizen, and I started here in 2017. So my lab doors have been open for about 3.5 years now. And so again, why am I giving this talk, right? Why would I be a person to give this talk? So I wanted, again, share my experiences with you, let you know how I use these platforms, provide you with resources, and also provide an informal discussion. This is going to be a very informal talk. I will be able to see you if you raise your hand. So if you have questions, let me know. Emily, would you mind monitoring the chat if someone wants to type questions? Yeah, okay, wonderful. So you can type your questions if you don't want to talk. But if you are comfortable raising your hand and asking questions, please do feel free to interrupt me or ask for clarification. If there are any platforms that I'm not talking about that you're interested in, you are more than welcome to email me. I'm going to send Emily a PDF of this presentation so you have everything, and you're also very welcome to email me if you have any specific questions or want to discuss anything further. So these are the platforms that I use, and these are the platforms that I'll be discussing today. These seem like, kind of based on the questions I saw, these are kind of the big things. And so I have some screenshots of my profiles for some of them, but not for others. But if there's time at the end and you want to see them, I'm happy to share and open up my profiles and show you kind of what I mean for the ones where I haven't provided screenshots. So this is kind of where I want to get to know you. We've got 13 people here. And so if you could very briefly just unmute, I'll call on you just so we know, who's around. It's unambiguous. And if you just want to unmute, tell me your name, your department, what degree you're earning, or if you're a postdoc, and then what platforms you use and why you're here, as a curiosity. So why don't we start with Molly James?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm Molly James. I'm with the English department. I'm currently in my first year pursuing a master's degree. I don't currently use any platforms to promote my research, which is why I'm here. I want to learn how to use platforms and how to use them effectively. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Mohammed Bishet. Sorry if I mispronounced names. Mohammed, are you here? All right, let's move on to Melissa.
Hello, I'm Melissa K. Hort, and I am in the Adult Education, Learning and Leadership department. I am completing my PhD. I'm now through all of my classes, and I'm just working on my research. I have started in LinkedIn, ResearchGate, and Twitter. Although LinkedIn is the only one that I have a little bit of information in, the other two are brand new. I'm hoping to learn how to use all of those platforms.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you so much. Okay. Ednaldo.
Hi everyone, my name is Arnaldo Borgato. I'm a PhD student in agronomy working in weed science. So yeah, I do use LinkedIn actually more professionally and not to promote my research, but I love Twitter. I think there's some amazing things in there and I try to promote my research in there, but I guess I need some more tips.
All right, cool. Hopefully I can provide those to you. Awesome, thanks. All right, Jerusha.
Hi, I'm Jerusha Matthews. I'm a master's student in the Diagnostic Medicine and Pathobiology department. I do currently have both LinkedIn and ResearchGate accounts, so I'm just looking into how to use them more effectively. I'm really not on ResearchGate much other than reading other people's research.
Great. So. Okay, awesome. Wonderful. All right, Monica.
Hey, my name's Monica Kernut. I am in I do accounting for the Polytechnic campus. I'm in the PMBA program, and I haven't done any research. I'm just here being nosy, and maybe you'll spark my interest to do research so I can post them on all of these fabulous social media sites.
Awesome, that's great, thank you. All right, Jean or Jean? Jean, I'm guessing? Do I have it right?
Yes, it's Jean.
Great.
Yeah, I'm Jean-Ribert Francois. I am a PhD student in Geography department. I am interested in agricultural biodiversity. And right now I have account like on everything, but I do not like promote any research yet on this. So I'm open to learn.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, wonderful. All right, Abdulaziz.
Yes, hello, this is Abdulaziz Al-Shihri. I am working on PhD degree in civil engineering department, and for some platform I am using only ResearchGate, and I do have like a LinkedIn account, but it's not active, and I am trying to promote my research in more than one platform, which will be really helpful in my future.
Great. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Krishani.
Hello, everyone. I'm Krishani. I'm a PhD student in diagnostic medicine and pathobiology. I'm studying viruses. I use LinkedIn and ResearchGate, but I had no idea how to use Twitter. So I'm trying to learn how to use that. So just try to learn how to use all three platforms to promote my research.
Cool. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got Bold, if that's the name. Screen name Bold. You're here. Oh. Oh, we've got typing. All right. Why don't we, okay, you don't have headphones right now. Why don't you type it in the chat and then I'll keep an eye on that and we'll move on to the next person. All right, Grace.
Hi, I'm Grace Elijah. I'm a PhD student in the Diagnostic Medicine and Pathobiology department. I currently use LinkedIn more for professional networking, so I'd like to learn how to apply my research to that. And I'm also getting married in November, so I'd kind of like some tips on how to connect my published research already from my maiden name to my married name, because I will change my name. So thanks.
Wonderful. Yeah, we will touch on that. So, and congratulations. Wonderful. All right. So Manoj has written in the chat that he's a PhD student in horticulture. He's got an account everywhere, but isn't quite sure how to promote his academic work and wants to learn how to best do that. So good. This is a great place for you. James, I know you, James. Why don't you just let everyone else know you too?
Yeah, sorry I was a little bit late. I had a meeting run late. So I'm James. I'm a PhD student in the biology department here. I currently really just use Twitter to promote my research, but I'd like to figure out ways to be a little bit more effective and reaching a broader audience.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Can help you with that. All right, so I've got Bold, who's a PhD student in DMP who uses LinkedIn. And we'll see is Mohammed. Mohammed, we'll give you another chance if you're here. Okay, Emily, last but not least. Oh, Mohammed's here. Do you want to just type in the chat? Yep, no problem. Emily, do you want to go ahead? Well,
yes, so Emily Nottingham, and I'm a master's student in biological and agricultural engineering. And I have a Twitter and LinkedIn, but I'm not active on them. So it'd be great to learn how to be.
Okay, oops, sorry. It seems like my slide had a mind of its own there. All right, so that's great. You guys all are here for pretty much the same reason, right? We all kind of want to know, how are we going to promote our academic research? What are some different ways you can do it? And importantly, what are some considerations, right? And some of these showed up in the chat. So we're gonna let Mohammed write in the chat to introduce himself. And so please, take a second to acquaint yourself with him when he does that. But for the sake of time, we'll move on. So, oops, there we go. Okay, so let's talk about research accessibility, right? This is a big thing because it's changed a lot, right? Since I started graduate school, we didn't have to do this a lot. Luckily, the internet was a thing then. I'm not going to date myself, but I definitely had to go to the library sometimes and get periodicals and photocopy them, right? This was a thing that I had to do, right? So in order to find new research, back when I first started, or actually, let's talk about my supervisors, right? They would have to go to the library. They would send a student to the library to photocopy articles or to photocopy full periodicals, right? So where you published was incredibly important then, right? You had to think about what journal is going to get the broadest readership, right? So where do you want to publish? And then moving forward in time, which databases are going to have it, right? The other place you would get research is conferences, right? So you would attend conferences, you would present your research, you would see new research, and you would be able to talk to other people about your research. And this is still very much the case. But research accessibility now it's a lot easier to access research, right? Almost every single journal is online, right? Some journals are only online, and a lot of journals as well will have open access. And we can talk a little bit about open access, although it's not really about promoting your research. And I imagine a lot of you don't have control over whether your articles will get open access or not, because this is something that most faculty will have to pay for. So depending on the journal you publish in. But there are a lot of different ways to find research, right? You have databases you can search. You can use Google to search, right? You can look at PubMed, for example, Web of Science. Preprints are a thing. We're not going to talk a ton about preprints today, but I'm happy to answer questions about them. I do actively use preprint servers. My lab posts preprints, so I'm happy to talk about those and how you can use sort of these social media platforms to promote your work even before it's published, right? Because oftentimes it takes a long time from even when you get the paper submitted to when it's published, right? How do you get your data out there? How do you get your research out there? How do you show productivity? Right? But in this day and age, it's actually really easy to get information overload. Research is so accessible. Information is so accessible that really, like, where do you look, right? Like, how do you find it? So the whole idea of promoting your research on the web is to make your research visible and make it easily accessible, right? So, you know, this is a bit of a redundant question. Why bother even promoting your research on the web, right? So why is this important? Talk a little bit about this, right? Visibility for you and your work in a sea of information, right? And so this can do all sorts of things for you, right? It can be a way to attract employers, mentors, publishers, collaborators, funders, right? If this information is found easily, people will know who you are, right? And so you can tell them who you are, right? Who are you? What are you interested in? Are you going to send out an application and someone's going to say, I have no idea who this person is? They might, but you guarantee the first thing they might do is stick your name into a Google search. What are they going to find when they do that? You also want to make sure they don't find, you know, the Facebook picture of, you know, what you did last Saturday night. So there are other things to consider with your web presence. We're not going to talk about those, right, this class, but, you know, you want your profiles that are on these different networks to be visible, right? And you to be professional, to really fully really describe who you are and what you're interested in, right? The other thing is, what have you accomplished? What are your research products? And so research products can be, you know, books, book chapters, publications, but they can also be poster presentations. They can be your dissertation or your thesis, right? They can be oral presentations, right? So what are your research products? How can you really emphasize or show to your potential reader what you've accomplished, right? Most people don't just post their CVs on the web, right? Also, where did you train, right? Where have you been? What departments have you been in? What degrees have you earned, right? So, you know, it's also good to have your educational profile there, and all of these platforms we're talking about today will give you the opportunity to do that. Also, what are your interests and what are your career goals, right? What are you interested in doing? Why is your research interesting to you? You know, this stuff is very captivating. To see that someone's passionate about what they do, or that, you know, why they're interested in it, really gives kind of the human factor to what you just see as a printed name on a screen. So why else? Why else do you think it's important? What's another, does anyone have an idea of something that could be a benefit of promoting their research on the web? Besides these things we already discussed about being visible? Any other thoughts?
Probably help with employment.
Yeah, right. It would definitely help with employment, right? If you're easy to find and, you know, your employer is able to find information on you, absolutely, right? One of the things so some science is incredibly collaborative and you get to interact with a lot of different people, but for the most part, depending on your field, science can be incredibly lonely, right? You go into the lab, you do your work, you write your papers, right? So social networking and promoting your research can also help you find a community, right? So this ideally would happen at conferences, but they're not always accessible. Conferences are getting more and more expensive to attend, and, you know, the accessibility of conferences has really kind of struck home this past year, right? Because almost all conferences are virtual and you don't get the same interactions, right? So this really helps with networking. So you have this community. Whoop, Fiona, sorry, my dog is very excited about promoting research on the web too. Yes, you'll get a walk later, right? So, you know, you find a community, right? A community of people that could be like-minded or not. You never know who you're going to meet, right? You can also show your creativity, right? A lot of these platforms will allow you to blog. So you can write an article, right? What are you interested in? What did you see? You know, what potentially do you want to put out there, right? Do you have a new idea that you're willing to share or get comments on, right? You can outsource a lot of this beyond your, you know, your network in person or, you know, your network in your field. So this is another big benefit to it, right? Also self-promotion. So this is a touchy subject with some people, right? So, you know, the humble brag. How do you promote your research without sounding like a braggart or without feeling like it's really hard for us, right? I don't know if anyone here has had to write a reference letter for themselves ever for their major professor, or has ever had to, you know, write a statement where they're trying to really promote what they've done. Sometimes it's really hard for us, right? It's really hard to say, hey, look, I've accomplished all these things, because you feel like you're not being modest. There is definitely a way to do this, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that. You know, there are ways to tactfully do this, and this is really how to go about it, right? Because you don't want to, you know, put your nose in the air and say, you know, I'm better than you. This is not the way to find employers or mentors or funders, right? This is a way for people to think you're a jerk. So there are definitely, okay, go on. So she clearly doesn't like that I'm talking to you. Sorry, guys. But you know, your name and your research will reach a broad audience, right? You should be posting about your research products. You should be posting about conferences you attend, right? And then what you do is you do that tactfully and people see it. Oh, this person's giving talks. Oh, this person's published a paper. Oh, this person has posted a preprint, right? And then they can see what you do when they wouldn't normally, right? Maybe you're out slightly out of their field and they aren't getting table of contents feeds for your work. All right, so there are a lot of different ways you can promote your research. And so I did mention these were some of the ones I use. So there are different sort of categories of these. So social networking, right, is gonna be Twitter and LinkedIn. So these are gonna be considered social networks, even though LinkedIn is more of a professional social network. It is, you know, all of professionalism, right? It's not just restricted to science. Then there's scholarly social networking, right? So you've got ResearchGate and Google Scholar. And again, these also aren't linked directly to science, right? So for example, Google Scholar can be used by any scholar, but these are scholarly. Like this is mostly academia that use these, right? In all sorts of different fields. And then there are digital identifiers. And so this is the ORCID or ORCID. Does anyone give me a thumbs up if you have an ORCID? All right, I see one. Okay. Give me a thumbs up if you don't know what an ORCID is. All right, I see some thumbs. Okay, good, we're gonna talk about this. I would say if you get anything out of this presentation, you know, this is gonna be one of the big ones. Go out and make yourself an ORCID. And this is gonna be especially important if you think you might be changing your name. There are also personal websites. I'm not gonna talk about personal websites today. You know, I think that they are beneficial. My lab has a website. I've never had a personal website. Yep, Mohammed, do you have a question? Oh, I see some things in the chat. Emily, just let me know if there's anything I need to address in there. But okay, great. All right, cool. So why don't we get started? We'll go through these things systematically. I'll let you know kind of overviews of them, what the pros and cons are from what I see, and then things that you're going to consider. And remember, this is coming from my perspective. So, you know, you may get different advice from different people who are in different fields or use something differently. So this is kind of like a bird's eye overview and my experiences. So just keep that in mind. And I'm happy to answer questions about each one and, you know, what I use them for. Okay, so LinkedIn. It seems like most people have a LinkedIn account. At least I would say the majority of you have a LinkedIn account. So, you know what it is, right? This is professional social networking. Right, so this isn't going to be like your Facebooks or your Twitter where, you know, you're talking about what you ate for breakfast or things like that, right? This is limited to professionalism, okay? And so this involves making a professional profile. So you go in and you put in what you want people to see or what you don't want people to see, right? You can put in your academic works, you can put in what you're interested in, you can put in when you were trained, right? What your current job is. You can put in a banner, you can put in a photo, you can have none of these things, you can choose who follows you, right? Some things you choose what's visible. So you can put information there that's at the ready, but it's not visible to everybody, right? So you can choose what the public sees and what you just have in there. You can also see who's viewed you. I personally don't use this feature, and I know that you can get more out of it if you get the professional subscription. But you can also, you know, if you are putting out feelers for jobs and you're doing that on LinkedIn, you can see who's viewed you, right? So that is a benefit. You can also blog. This is a really nice thing about LinkedIn, right? You can share articles and you can write about them. You can use hashtags, you can @ people. So this is really nice. You can also sign up for alerts and notifications, right? So this is a good way for you to be able to promote your research, you know, in a big professional network setting, right? And this is gonna hit people that are outside of academia. So this is one benefit of LinkedIn. And so, you know, if we're going to talk specifically, what are the pros of LinkedIn? Now, I'm going to say that all of these, I would encourage you, if you're interested and you have the time and you are willing, get an account, right? It doesn't hurt you. The only way I would say it hurts you is if you get an account and it stays out of date for a long time. At that point, if you're not interested, you're not using it, just deactivate your account. Because someone's going to find that, it's going to show up on their search. And so you want them to be kind of up to date. Okay. So what are some of the benefits of using LinkedIn, right? You've got a broad range of users. So these are going to be people outside academia and outside, you know, scholarly work. So this is a big benefit, right? Especially if you're thinking you might want to go into, you know, government or industry or, you know, some other field that's outside of academia. You know, it would be really good for you to have some visibility there. Employers are very active. This is a wonderful place to find a job, right? Employers are active. And I say employers, I don't necessarily say supervisors. So this is one of the questions I got. I don't look for trainees on LinkedIn. If someone contacted me on LinkedIn, I would ask them to continue the discussion by email. But a lot of employers do. So if you are looking for a job, this is a good place to be and a good place to actually indicate that you are looking for a job. Okay. You can endorse skills, right? You can have people endorse your skills. Are you really good at statistical analysis, right? Are you really good at, you know, I'm trying to think of, are you really good at molecular biology? Are you, you know, really good at creative writing? People can go in and they can endorse your skills. And if you have a lot of endorsements, this is a good way for potential employers to say, hey, this person has a skill that we're interested in, and they've been endorsed by people we respect, right? So this is a big benefit of LinkedIn. You get a free account. It is upgradable. So this is one of the few that can be paid. If you want to upgrade, it'll give you additional. I have a free account. I've never intend to upgrade it. This can be, you know, you can see who's viewed you. You can get more metrics and things like that. For my position right now, and even when I was looking for this job, I didn't see a benefit to upgrading, but some people want to. So that's something to consider. You can share that you're hiring or that you're on the job market. So I'm sure none of you are probably hiring right now, but you can share that you're on the job market or you're going to be on the job market. And you can also see people who are hiring. They will share that they're hiring, so you can see that as well. There's direct messaging, which is nice. So you can directly message somebody. Professionally, they can directly message you. So sometimes it's a good way to start a dialogue. I've actually connected people, trainees with, you know, people I know in industry. I've connected them through LinkedIn, right, through a direct message and through them following each other. And then they carried on the conversation from there. You can also, again, you know, you can blog, post articles, you could broadcast messages. Some of the cons of this, at least to me, it's not overly conducive to academia. So inputting publications here, it's definitely on the lower end of the spectrum with regards of how easy it is to put your publication and research works on there. Most of the time you have to add them manually, which is a giant pain. If you have, you know, a very eager undergraduate who wants to help you update your LinkedIn profile, that's wonderful. But if not, it's a giant time suck. And actually all of my publications aren't even on mine because I just don't have the time to do it, to dedicate to it. So. Okay, so what are when would you use it, right? Mostly LinkedIn is used when you're looking for employment or you have employment to offer out, but mostly for us, it's gonna be looking for employment, right? You also can blog about a new research product, or, you know, research work, which could be, you know, a poster, a conference, a paper, a book chapter, anything like that. But this is really geared more towards non-academic jobs. So this is going to be kind of tangential to scholarly work. So, but you can definitely use it to promote your research. And so, you know, just to answer one of the questions, as a faculty member and a PI, I don't use it much. As I said before, it's not even really up to date, which, you know, I should slap myself on the wrist for because I'm giving you guys this talk. But I wouldn't seek out prospective students or lab staff on this platform. And if someone applied to my lab, if they didn't have a LinkedIn if they didn't have, you know, if they have a LinkedIn account, it makes no difference to me, right? Whether they're gonna, you know, get the job or not. I wouldn't look at that. I would be more interested in looking at their CV and also to seeing if they have some of these other platforms, right, where I can see what their academic works are. If it gets to that point, new graduate students often don't have them, and that's totally fine. So keep that in mind. Okay, questions on LinkedIn before we move on? Does anyone have any questions? This is kind of the one I use the least, so. Okay. Cool. Yeah, if you have questions, you can definitely post them in the chat, or you can wait till the end and ask me if something pops up if you want to compare some of these. So, okay, let's move on to Twitter. So Twitter is a big one. I love science Twitter so much. I did not tweet before I started my lab. I wish I would have started earlier. I know a lot of trainees who do tweet. There are definitely a lot of things you need to consider here, but I get a lot of information on what's come out in my field and around my field on Twitter, right? So, you know, it seems a little bit, you know, when you think of Twitter, we often think of non-science things. I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but, you know, it's not always the first thing that comes to mind, but there's this whole little microcosm of Twitter, which is SciTwitter, right? Science Twitter. Okay, so this is a social media platform, right? So like LinkedIn, this is social media, but this is not purely professional. This is everything, right? Just social media. So there are a lot of things that can pop up on Twitter, and there are some ways that you can kind of tailor your account to be, you know, towards academia. And I apologize to those of you who aren't in science. I'm going to say science a lot, but this really is applicable to anybody in academia and who does research. So, right. So this is used for professional and non-professional networking, right? And it involves creating a profile. So you can tweet and you can follow others' tweets. This is kind of the way it works. I'm sure you guys all know this, right? Even those of you who don't have an account, you know, I'm sure unless you've been living under a rock, you know what Twitter is. So, and then specifically for scientists, we've got SciTwitter, right? This is Twitter for disseminating and communicating research. And I'm sure that there is Twitter for other, you know, for non-science academic fields, right? For English, for social stuff, for social science, for, you know, education. I would be very shocked if these didn't exist. And if they don't exist, you need to start it and make a hashtag. Okay, you're tasked with that if they don't exist, because this is a huge benefit, at least to being in science. And so there are different branches of Twitter used for different things, right? So it's important to keep that in mind. And this is going to come, there are a lot of caveats that come with Twitter and a lot of sort of considerations here because it is so broad, right? This is not just restricted to scholarly work, and you can tweet whatever you want, right? You can tweet your own little tiny manifestos. So good. All right, so some of the pros of Twitter. Again, like LinkedIn, broad range of users, right? And this isn't just academia either, right? This is going to be a broad range of users in, you know, in industry and government, you know, in the private sector, lots of users, right? And now, you know, more and more people and institutions and publishers are gonna have Twitter accounts, right? So this is good. You can follow whomever you like and get notifications when they tweet, right? So your favorite journal, you know, an institution you're interested in working in, a department, they have a Twitter account. You can get notifications when they tweet, so you can stay up to date, right? So individuals, lots of individuals, institutions, journals, funders, etc., have Twitter accounts. This is a good way for you to make yourself known to them, right? Follow them. If you do something that could pertain to that, you can tag them, right? They will see you. Okay, but this, again, you know, it comes with some caveats, and there's a fine line to dance here because you also don't want to be annoying. You don't want people to have to mute you. So you get lots of visibility here, tons. I would say this is where you get the most visibility, right? Again, not everybody's on Twitter, but I would say of all the platforms we're discussing today, Twitter is going to be the one that has the most users. So, you know, even people in my field who are approaching retirement and are, I'm not going to say how old, have Twitter accounts. Right, so this tells you this is broadly used, right? So what you're going to want to do, though, and we're talking purely scholarly, if you use Twitter for, you know, tweeting your breakfast or posting political things or jokes or funny memes, you know, that's wonderful. Have a separate account for that, right? Have a dedicated professional account if you're going to do academic tweeting, right? Because you never know, someone might not appreciate your joke, right? So you can definitely, you know, show your personality and your creativity. But if you have, you know, polarizing things to post, which a lot of us do, right? We're human beings, maybe use a separate account for that. Or perhaps don't use Twitter for that, right? Maybe you'll get into less arguments. So you're going to want to probably build a dedicated professional profile, okay? For academic networking, I say science here, it's interchangeable again. So there's rapid dissemination. So things will move really quickly, even if, especially if you say, please retweet, right? You get this huge amount of visibility really, really quickly, which can be good and bad, right? So if it's something that you, oops, I shouldn't have posted that. A lot of people will probably see it before you delete it. But if it's something that you want to share, you know, you've accomplished something big, you've gotten a really great grade on something, a great teaching evaluation, you know, you've given a talk at a conference you really liked, you've published a paper, people will retweet it, right? And then everyone will say, oh, look at this paper, this is really interesting. Who is this person? I think that this is really cool. I would have never seen it otherwise, right? And again, yeah, so you've all heard of going viral. This is not just specific for Twitter. And this, of course, is my little pun, right? Not so funny now, but you know what I mean. right? So you can get a lot of visibility here. There's also direct messaging. So this is similar to what you've got with LinkedIn. You can direct message people outside of what's going on in the Twitterverse, which is really nice because you can connect with collaborators there, right? Or, you know, publishers might contact you and say, hey, I read this preprint. Would you consider, have you submitted it? Would you consider submitting to us? I think it would fit in really well, right? These types of things happen all the time. So yeah, accounts are free. This is really nice. All of these accounts are free. Some of them are upgradable. And you can also meet people before you actually meet them, right? You can follow people on Twitter, they can follow you back, and then you go to a conference, and this is a great icebreaker, right? Oh, hey, you know, I know you from Twitter. So you don't have to be nervous, especially if it's, you know, a faculty member you might want to work with or a potential employer or something like that, right? This is a really nice way to break the ice. So there are definitely some cons, though, to Twitter. I don't think these cons should preclude you from making an account and using it, but you can get caught up in the non-professional social side of Twitter, right? So that is fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. Just you may want to consider keeping that distinct from your professional profile. You can create an alias for that if you want to, but remember your potential, you know, your potential employers or, you know, someone who's at the next step, a potential supervisor might be able to see things. And, you know, you might say, oh, well, if they don't like what I say, I don't want to work for them anyway. That's totally fine. I understand that completely. But you may just want to think, you know, before you tweet anything under your profile, you know, is there any reason that this would be disadvantageous, right? It can also be information overload and a giant time suck, right? If you get notifications for everything, your email is going to be full, your phone's going to be binging off the hook. And if you don't, you have to be careful that you actually have research. You can actually have time to do your research to promote, right? So this can be a bit of a time suck. I personally turn notifications off on Twitter on all of my devices, and then I check it, you know, at designated times. That's it. I know some people are able to not be distracted by notifications. I'm not one of them. So if you can do that and you want to keep it on, that's awesome. But this is kind of the strategy I use to not get sucked into the time vortex that is Twitter. Okay, so when would you use it? All the time, right? This is something great to use all the time when you're looking for a job, when you've just started a job, when you've accomplished something, when, you know, when you want to see what's going on, right? You want to see what people are doing, right? What have they accomplished? What have they posted? You know, this is a great thing to use all the time, of course, with that caveat of make sure that, you know, perhaps you want to just limit your time, maybe, to make sure you have time to actually do your research. You can use it for all these different things, right? I'm not going to read this out. You guys can all read, you'll get a PDF of this. But not only can you promote your own work, you can promote other people's work, right? Did your colleague publish something, right? Did someone else in your lab publish something, right? And so this is actually really good. You can say, hey, this is really neat. You can comment on it, right? Which shows that you're engaged. So this is great. Even if it's not your own, you know, you can say, hey, look at this really neat paper that came out of even another institution anywhere, right? This is so cool. This is how it moves the field forward. This is getting you visibility, even though it's not your work, right? So there are lots of options here. Also, conference live tweeting. I'm hoping, well, those of you who haven't been to academic conferences yet, at some point, hopefully you'll get an opportunity to do that. Some conferences have live tweeting. So if you can't attend a session, or even if you can't attend the conference, you can still kind of see what's going on. Right, so this is really nice, and this is something you also have to be careful of because you have to have permission to live tweet information. So this is something that the conference organizers will tell you if it's okay to live tweet or not. Again, you can follow journals, preprint servers, individuals. A lot of institutions and people have Twitter accounts, and so this is also a good thing when you're looking for a position. You can actually tweet that you're looking. Right, I'm going to be looking for a postdoc. I'm going to be looking for a job. This is what I work on, you know, please retweet, right? This is a very, very, you know, it's a very useful thing to do. And who knows, you know, you might get a direct message saying, hey, I'm looking for someone that has your skill set at about that time. So it definitely doesn't hurt. I would say that the pros outweigh the cons. And so you can tweet about anything related to academia. Again, science, apologies, but, you know, did you read a good paper? Did you see a good talk? Do you want advice, right? There are a lot of these, oh, you know, I'm trying to do this, or, oh, I'm thinking about this. Does anyone have comments, right? So there are a lot of ways you can use Twitter for this stuff. And so, you know, the ability to tweet is, you know, it's really valuable. You can get information and you can give information and you increase your visibility. Okay, but there are some things to consider. Really, definitely some things to consider, right? You want to be tactful, not boastful. So you publish a paper, you want to tweet about it. The way to not do it is to say, look at me, I'm so great. I published a paper after a year. No one else in my lab has done this. Please retweet. This is not an effective tweet. Yes, your paper is there, but you look like a jerk. So this is not going to be an effective way to tweet your research. The way to do that is going to be, we're really excited to have published this work. Here's a tiny little blurb on what it's about. I worked with X, Y, and Z person, at KSATE RSCAD, right? And then if you want to say more about your paper, you can start a thread, right? You can really describe it. I don't usually do this, but it's very effective for a lot of people who do, right? This is what the paper is about. And so you'll often get a lot of likes and a lot of retweets and a lot of follows. Every paper, every preprint I've posted, I've gotten at least 5 or 6 new follows from that. So, just basically stick to the work, right? You can say, we did this, but really everyone who looks at it is going to see, okay, you're the lead author. So they're going to know, right? Everyone who's going to be reading this is going to know that. So you don't need to, you need to toot your own horn, but tactfully, right? So you're going to focus instead of, how great you are, because you are great, but you have to be careful how you say it, right? Focus on the research and then your colleagues and collaborators, right? Who did you do this work with, right? Why is it cool? Focus on the work, right? Also, if you're not sure if something's boastful, there is absolutely nothing wrong with you putting your tweet in email and asking someone to read it. There is no problem with that, especially if you're interested in tweeting about unpublished work. This is something that you definitely need to talk to your major professor about and any collaborators, right? Because you're putting something on the web. It's accessible to everybody. If anybody else could be affected by that, you should talk to them first, right? And if you're not sure what to write, just ask them. Say, hey, I was thinking about tweeting this. What do you think? Right? Because you can always go in and delete it, but it's better to just, have your tweet set up and go from there, right? And again, don't live tweet events unless you're allowed to. Okay, you don't want to tweet about someone's talk at a conference when they have specifically said that it wasn't okay. This is a big ethical issue. So, and then here with Twitter, this can be the same for almost all social media, but Twitter is actually the big one. Remember to unplug every once in a while. Don't get so caught up that you're not going to have research to promote. So, it's a fine balance, and everyone has a different strategy for dealing with it. But I would say, overall, Twitter for promoting your research is one of the best platforms. Okay. Questions about Twitter? Okay, I'm going to move on. We've got 40 minutes. I don't want to run over, and we have a couple more platforms to talk about. So ResearchGate. Some of you guys have ResearchGate, which is really cool, right? So this is categorized as scholarly social network, right? This is going to be pretty specific to academia, right? Although anybody can use it, anybody can make a free account, but this is going to be towards academia. Like, it is geared, it is designed for that, right? And the mission of ResearchGate is to connect scientists from around the world and make research accessible. So you can share your research works here. And oftentimes they will be automatic. You'll have the option to automatically add. You can just approve. They're found through other sources, right? So you can share your papers and other works. You can post full text, right? You can share your posters, right? You can share conference abstracts, okay? You can ask and answer questions. This is great. I don't know if anybody has ever Googled something that, what was going on in their lab. I need to know what, oh, does this buffer work or something like that? And the first hit might be a ResearchGate thread, right? Someone else has asked that question. So this is really useful. I've answered questions on ResearchGate. I've never asked one, but this is a really nice feature where you can actually get input from other people in academia with regards to what your question is. Although you do have to be very careful to vet it. I would certainly talk to other people, because just because it worked for someone doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work for you or is the best information, right? But oftentimes they might be able to point you to a publication that can help you. People are very helpful in ResearchGate for the most part. You can also find positions and collaborators. I've had people contact me because they saw a paper pop up on ResearchGate. So people who follow you can get notifications when you publish. That's actually the default. And you can turn those off, of course, but they might see that you've published something, and I've had someone reach out to me for a reagent. Oh, we're interested in doing this. Would you mind sharing that? Right. So, there are a lot of different things. ResearchGate is a really, really great social network for academia. And so again, like the others, this is based on creation of a profile. Okay. All right, so the pros of ResearchGate, many researchers have account. It's not quite as widely used as Twitter or as LinkedIn. A lot of things, but many researchers have accounts. You can, again, ask and answer questions. You can it will automatically detect your new work and ask you if you want to add it, and ask you if you want to add the full text. Okay. You can have the option to upload full text or keep it private. So you can have the full text there, but you can keep it private to individuals viewing your profile, and that can be important for copyright issues, right? You can also add unpublished scholarly works. So it'll actually also detect your preprints, and it'll say that it's a preprint, right? So you can also put posters in there and say which conference you presented the poster at. And so this is going to increase your visibility to your academic colleagues. It's going to help you, again, find jobs and collaborators. There's direct messaging, like in the others. And you can also set up notifications so you know when someone publishes, right? And they may be able to set up, they might have notifications set up to know when you publish, right? There's a new research work here. And so it's also about following and being followed. And in my experience, even, I've been using this since I was a graduate student. And if I followed, Dr. X bigwig in my field, oftentimes they would follow back, right? So it was actually pretty cool to be followed back by someone who, I thought would never actually even take the time to figure out who I was. So it's really neat. It's very easy. They just click follow back. So that's really nice. So some of the cons of this are it's not quite as widely used as other networks, although it's getting up there. More and more people are getting ResearchGate accounts. And there are some issues with copyright for published work. So you do need to make sure that it is okay with the publisher. If it's open access, you're totally fine, right? But you do have to make sure it's okay with the publisher. If the article is behind a paywall and you post it, there can be copyright issues, right? So you want to avoid that. Also, if you're posting something, that might also be my considerations on my next slide. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So this is kind of where I was going with that. But when do you want to use it? All the time, right? Looking for a job as well, right? So this is good. You can find potential employers and supervisors. So things to consider, make sure you have permission to upload research works. And so this is going to be from the publisher and your PI, right? So if you present a poster at a conference, don't upload it for everyone to see unless you've talked to your major professor, because a lot of those things have unpublished work. And so they will know they will be able to tell you whether it's okay or not, right? But you'll want to check with all of the authors before you put those things up, even if you own them, okay? And then also, those of you who are on ResearchGate probably see that there's this RG metric. This is kind of a black box of how active are you on it and how many research works do you have. I think it's a bit ridiculous, but it does have a metric if you're interested in that. I just wouldn't read too much into it. It's basically, you get points for asking and answering questions. The algorithm's very strange. So I think it's silly, but it does have a metric. So if you're into that sort of thing, I wouldn't read too much into it. If you have a low metric, don't, it's not a problem. It's not a problem, especially at this point in your career. So, okay. Questions about ResearchGate? Okay, good. So Google Scholar, right? So Google Scholar is not really a social network, right? It's a way to search for scholarly material and profiles. Okay, so Google Scholar is really great, and it's different from normal Google. Okay, so you can keep track, you can search, you can you can access scholarly material, you can keep track of citations over time. How many times has this article been cited and by whom, right? It also calculates citation metrics. And so these metrics are actually not silly. These are, algorithms that are easy to understand. We'll get into that. But they're mostly, I'm assuming those of you who have thought about publishing in academic journals know what the impact factor is. So this is basically an impact factor for authors. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. And so it's different from normal Google, right? You can certainly search academic things in Google, but you're going to get all sorts of hits, right? And often you might actually get a hit that says, go to Google Scholar. So this search is only for scholarly material, right? So you'll often get a link to this if you Google something. So this is going to be different. This is going to be kind of like tailored, a tailored search within scholarly works. Okay. This also is based on creation of a profile. Right? You don't have to have a profile to have Google Scholar preference, to have Google Scholar presence, right? Your papers are going to be there anyway, right? But there are some benefits to creating a profile, okay? You can also sign up to get alerts if you have a profile. This is really cool. right? You can get a new alert when an author publishes something. If there's a certain term, you know, that's used in your research in particular, you can get an email alert when there's a new scholarly work. So this is really nice, you know, but it's also always worth kind of making sure that you only have that for things that are very important. If not, you kind of get information overload and you just end up deleting the email. So, you know, just keep in mind and maybe be a little bit selective and add things as you go. Okay, so what's a Google Scholar profile? So it's going to be very similar to a lot of these others, you know, your name, your title, photo, you can have your co-authors there, your citation metrics, and then accessibility of your articles as well, right? It will say how many articles you have accessible. So this is going to be showcasing your scholarly work, number of citations they've received. So this is the big one, right? You get to see right there, there's a number that says how many citations does this article have. Okay. And this includes all scholarly works. It's not just published papers. It's not just preprints. It's not just posters. This is going to include dissertations, right? I was very shocked to see that my dissertation was on Google Scholar, but it's publicly available, right? So there it is, right? Book chapters, you know, preprints, conference abstracts, those are all going to show up. Basically, any scholarly work that's freely available is going to show up on Google, or any information on scholarly work. You don't always get full text, but you'll have information there. And so this is one of the metrics I was talking about. So this is the H-index. This measures your productivity and citation impact, right? This is for an individual scientist. So this is, instead of being for a journal, is going to be for a scientist. And I have an example. I think I put my profile up there, so I'll be able to show you exactly what that means. And then I also have this I-10 index, which is just the number of publications you have with at least 10 citations. So the H-index is a little bit more valuable if you want to, you know, if you want to use it. Some people ask for it. If you have, you know, a high H-index, you can stick it in your cover letter for a job, but most people don't really care, right? I wouldn't look at someone's H-index before I hired them. But it's an interesting metric for you to sort of keep track of who's citing your work. Okay, so let's look at my Google Scholar profile. So this is what the public sees. And so what it's got here, you can choose to put your picture there or not. It says what your position is and what school you're at, and that you're verified, right? They verified my email address at my institution, okay? And it has a link to my homepage. Now again, I don't have a personal website. My lab's website is here. So if they click that, they can go straight to Shames Lab, like kstate.com or kstate.edu/Shames Lab. They can get right there, right? And also there are key terms. So this is what I do, right? So bacterial pathogenesis and host pathogen interactions, and you can put what you would like here, right? Where would you pop up if someone searched? And then what it has is this list of your scholarly works, and it sorts them by the number of times they're cited, right? And it's got the year there. And so this is going to be everything. This is going to include your conference abstracts, dissertation, and whatnot. And then you have your metrics on the right. So the total number of citations, and then they do, I think, from the past 3 or 4 years, maybe past 5 years, and then your H-index and your I-10 index. And so I'll use mine as an example. The way this works, it's very simple. I have 11 papers that have been published at least 11 times. Now I have 20 some odd research products. So if I get a 12th paper that gets cited 12 times, my H-index will go up to 12. So it's basically how many papers do you have with that many citations? So that's how you calculate an H-index. You're welcome to go online and Google the actual algorithms, but that's the easiest way to describe it. You can have 10 papers, but if you only have 5 that have been cited 5 times, that's your H-index. If only one of them has been cited once, your H-index is 1, right? So that's kind of how that works. And then you can also track metrics over time. You know, when are you getting all your citations? It's kind of fun to look at, a little bit useless in my opinion. But it's nice to see. I mean, you can also get alerted when someone cites your work, right? You can get an email notification saying, oh, this paper's been cited. And then you can go say, okay, who cited it? Also, these are clickable links. This will give you a list of all of the papers all of the works that have cited this article, right? So you can go through and look at them, which is kind of nice for, you know, for new works as well, right? You can say, oh, you know, we published this last year. Who's been citing it? Who's looking at it? And then here's your accessibility. So I'm gonna motor through this a little bit, and apologies that I'm running out of time. I know everyone's probably got some Zoom fatigue, but there are a lot of pros to this. I see no reason why you shouldn't have a Google Scholar account. You know, you've got metrics, you can follow researchers, and everything's easily accessible. But the problem here is you can have Google gangers. So it's sometimes very difficult to differentiate individuals with the same name on Google Scholar, right? And so you also can't readily control included content. So these are some of the things that are a little bit of, could be considered pitfalls, but overall, Google Scholar is a great profile. So you can do it all the time, right? Set up notifications. And then also know that your works are going to show up on both Google and Google Scholar. It's a great way for a quick click to showcase all of your works, right? If someone looks you up, they can just go to your profile and there's everything, right? You can also add your homepage to your profile. So I'm going to move on. If there are questions at the end, I will happily take them, but I'm going to move on now to what I think is probably the thing that, that you all should strongly consider getting if you don't already have, is going to be that ORCID, right? And so what is this? This is a digital identifier for an individual. So this is a number, right? This is going to be a unique digital identifier for you. Think about it as a barcode, right? So if people have your ORCID number, they can go and look at you specifically, right? They can look at that profile. So this is really great because it will automatically update things. There are things you have to put in there manually, but you will also get automatic updates of, your scholarly works. So, if you have a new publication and it's detected, it'll give you an email. Hey, this has been detected, right? I have my example in a minute here. Yes, so this is really great, especially if you're concerned about name changes, right? If you change your name for any reason, right? Marriage just being one of them. There are lots of reasons people change their names. Okay, so this is going to be great because your ORCID is going to stay the same regardless of your name change. Okay. Right, and so it links your name to, so your name is linked to manuscript author lists. So, you'll get that. It'll use that to detect your works. And so what does this look like? So here's my public profile. I'm lucky I don't have Google gangers, but for people who do, this number will be unique, right? And so here, you have all sorts of things. I have another slide with what the works look like, but you have your employment, right, where you've worked. And you also have your education and qualifications. And if you look here, you see the source is me. So you can see what the source is when you look at people's ORCID profiles, who put that in there, right? And you can also link other IDs. So Loop is something that is specific to a journal. I have an account, I link them, and then Scope is author ID. This is paid. Not a lot of people use it. We're not going to talk about it today, but you can link accounts here as well, right? So people can go to your ORCID and they can say, oh, here's this account, here's that account. They all talk to each other, which is really nice. And so one quick point about the works here is, so the source is a little bit different, right? So I put this in, but it was through a search, right? So a lot of these are through Crossref, which means that they were detected. These are things that were detected by the algorithm that were mine and I approved them. Yes, these are my works. Right, so you get to see that here, which is really nice. And it's a preferred source. So, it's got the stamp of approval. And I would say the most important thing about ORCID is that when you have published works, your ORCID goes into those published works. So anyone who's interested can see exactly who you are, right? And I'll give you an example of this. This is the first research paper that was published from my lab. I was the only one with an ORCID, but you see this little button here? So this means that I have an ORCID account. And the online version of this article, this is clickable. It will take someone straight to my ORCID account. They can see all of my training, all of my publications. You can put professional memberships in there. You can also put your funding. I have my funding in there, but I make it private for my own reasons. But this is really good. So, okay, pros and cons. Again, I've talked about a lot of these. The pros we've gone through, but the cons, the author lists aren't shown in the works. So where you are in the author list isn't directly accessible, but the links are there. So if someone's interested, they can go and have a look at your paper. They need to be vetted, right? If you're not careful, you just accept everything. Sometimes maybe your Google ganger will have an article in your account. So you have to just pay attention to that. You definitely have to okay things before they go there, though. It's not completely automatic. So, consideration. So this is going to be my last slide. I've got some questions to answer. I know some of you will probably have to go when the hour is up, and that's okay. I'm happy to answer questions by email. But things to consider, right? If you are about to publish something, right, or there's a research work and you're not the one submitting it, make sure the corresponding author knows about your ORCID. Oftentimes when papers or scholarly works are being submitted, it's at 7 o'clock at night and you're just uploading all the files and it says, oh, do the authors have ORCIDs? So they can either email you and then wait until you respond and not get it done then. But most of the time they'll just say, nah, they don't have them. Or, sometimes they will ask you. So I mean, hopefully, just end of the day, just make sure your major professor or anyone who's going to be submitting the stuff knows that you have an ID, and also make sure they know what your initials are. These are things that seem silly, but are very important for being able to identify you and make sure you're searchable. So make sure it's there, right? Just so you have it, here it is, right? You can keep sections private that you don't want the public to see. And you can you need to keep your non-automated information current, right? So there are things like your employment, your education, your professional societies, those aren't going to be automatically updated. So you just need to go in and do that, but it's pretty easy to do. The GUI is very good. So, okay. I kind of rushed through that a bit, but I think it's pretty straightforward. I'm sure, if you guys have other questions, I'm going to kind of touch on some of these. These are some of the questions that that were sent to me right before the talk. I know I hit on some of them. So, pros and cons of LinkedIn, again, I don't use it that much, but I do know people who use it. So I would be happy to, connect you with those people. But I would say, when you're applying for a postdoc, I wouldn't worry so much about LinkedIn, right? I would worry a little bit, not worry, but I would think more about, making myself visible on some of these other platforms, right? Maybe following the people that your potential supervisors on Twitter, if they're on Twitter. If they're not, that's okay too, right? So these are all things that you can use at your discretion. You may have seen this talk and said, I don't want to use any of these, right? If you take anything away from it, I would say get your digital identifier, right? Because this is going to follow you throughout your academic career. So yeah, best places to promote on the web. If there's something I haven't covered, if this is one of these is your questions, or if you feel that these haven't been sufficiently answered, I'm happy to do that. I like Twitter the best for communicating my science. I think it reaches the broadest audience. And I like also communicating other people's science on Twitter, and I have the opportunity to do that. So I really like it, even though I really like having my other profiles. This is the best way for me, at least. This is what I like the most. And then the question from the computer science student. I actually outsourced this question and I have an answer to it, but I think the best thing to do would be for me to connect you with the person I outsourced to. So please send me an email afterwards. And this person has said that they would be happy to discuss this with you. My work, I don't use GitHub. We don't do a lot of this work, but this is a really valid question and a really important one. So I am happy to connect you with one of my colleagues who does this kind of work and is happy to answer this question for you. Okay, so in conclusion, I'm running out of time, but create as many of these profiles as you're comfortable with. They will increase your visibility, right? And networking is important. Right? So you never know where you'll find your next position or collaboration. And there you go, right? Here are some resources. I got a lot of the information about things that I wasn't fully aware of, about the pros and cons of some of these from this first link. So please go ahead and have a look at that. You can get more information on all of these platforms. And then here are the links to these platforms where you can set up an account. And so we're a little over an hour, but I am more than happy to answer questions if anything's come in the chat, or you can just sort of pipe up if you have anything you want to ask me. Okay, I see some things in the chat. Let me just answer those. Okay. Yeah, so Arnaldo asked about LinkedIn. So it's asking, should LinkedIn be very well updated, or should there just be a brief summary of the CV or resume? And when listing scholarships, awards, and recognitions. So, okay, so it's definitely not arrogant to put your scholarships on there, right? That's something I would say is probably even better than having to mess around with putting your publications in. Definitely put in your scholarships, right? This is really good because showing that you can get money, that says a lot about your ability to do research. Someone has given you money to do it. Right? Definitely do this. And when you get scholarships, also tweet about it, right? You can thank the institution. There's very tactful ways to do this. And if anyone wants proofreading of tweets, I'm always happy to do it. But I'm sure that, your colleagues and major professors would also help you with that. But yeah, tell the world. And that's a huge accomplishment. Okay, mentioned in the past that people had to go to the library to search for paper they wanted to read, right? Researchers are begging people to read their paper and asking for okay. Authors are dragged into metadata like views. Okay, to find out how good the paper is. So how should a young researcher think about their work with regards to all of this? I would say do the best work you can, right? And then you can use some of these tools to promote your work, right? Why does it stand out? Why is it cool, right? We, you know, this is kind of good and bad that we live in this like kind of tunnel vision in our research, right? We think so much about it. And we really, you know, we're passionate about it. We have this sort of affinity, and let other people know why, right? Because I agree with you, you know, it's just how many citations is someone going to see my paper, right? Tweet about it. Ask your friend to tweet about it, right? There's nothing wrong with that, right? Or even just say, hey, we found this really cool thing. Or, you know, oh, we're following up on this. I'm really excited to announce this was a great collaboration between these groups, you know, or my department is so great. K-State's the best school, you know, this kind of thing, right? There are ways to do this that aren't, you know, that aren't going to be like, you know, like arrogant or bragging. I'm not sure, Manoj, if that answers your question or not. But does anyone else have any questions in the meantime? Okay, good.
I have a quick question. Do you think, you know, our profiles on these various websites are something that we should be including on like CVs, or do you just leave it to sort of like, well, if you're on the platform, they'll find me, or I could find them?
I think it's a great thing to put on your CV. That's an awesome question. I haven't seen that, but if I got a CV from a potential postdoc or, you know, grad student and it had those things, I would certainly look. Yeah, I think that's a great thing to put there. It can have its own heading, right? Yeah, I think that's, you know, I think that's a great idea. There's no harm in it. I think especially the ORCID would be a really good one to put in there. But yeah, I mean, as long as it's not, you know, I wouldn't put it at the forefront, but definitely you can have a section for, you know, professional profiles. So yeah,
Thanks.
Great idea.